I think we've had a lot of, we've had a very, very rich discussion. I think a lot of the questions are touching on the issue of the context in which the country programs are implemented, in which they offer their benefits, and how that context is changing with the change in local capacity. And so I would guess that that's going to be an area of very considerable discussion. Now, I'm going to very quickly go and take that seat, but I want to invite those of you who'd like to have questions or comments to raise your hands and identify yourselves, just in case I can't do that. And then we'll take the discussion from there. So I see one hand over here, and I'll ask you to give your question while I take my seat.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm John Coonrod with the Hunger Project, and I'm just wondering what the evaluations saw in terms of the gender issues in agricultural policy that IFPRI has had influence on. I realize, thank you, Karen, for sitting down, but this is like not exactly a gender balanced team here. And and given the importance of gender in agriculture in Africa in particular, but really everywhere, what has IFPRI's impact on gender-related issues in agricultural and food policy been?
Let's take just a few questions. I think I see you standing up, so let's go for that, and then we'll go to this side of the room.
Olivier Aker with the Development Strategy and Governance Division. Peter, I have a question for you. Have you looked at budget issues? Especially, you know, I could imagine that there is a correlation between the success of a country program and, let's say, the average budget in that country program. And then to say, to some extent, you know, you need a minimum budget to have these successful outcomes. And then also related to issues, you know, how much should be allocated to the different areas, and maybe also how much should be allocated to DC support and in-country stuff. Thanks.
Thanks very much. We've got gender and we've got budget. I see Nancy. Can we give you the floor, please?
It's all really interesting. I have a question that anybody might answer for IFPRI from the board. This seems very convincing. Should there be more push on using IFPRI assets overall in country programs compared to other things? So that's one question. The second is, I think you have all indirectly or directly put emphasis on the maybe greater effect of the country programs on potentially greater effect on institution building. But it is still mostly potential. And I just wanted to mention for I think it's for any of you up there, that several foundations in the US put together money for a think tank initiative. Some of you might know about this. And this is inspired a little bit by David's last remark, that it's good to have what I thought of as somewhat more independent group looking at policy researchers and their contributions on agriculture than you can have within the ministry itself. So my sense is that the outcome of a just finished evaluation of the think tank initiative is that it has not succeeded as much as was hoped. And this is, particularly the first round was in Africa. And there are really some interesting questions about why it didn't succeed that had to do with money and with sufficient core funding and a whole set of issues that I think some of you would probably be interested in seeing and learning from, in particular, Peter and your successor. Where are you, Peter? Where are you, Peter? Not up there. Peter and your successor. There you are, Peter. All these guys, you know. You all look alike to me. And I think maybe we should think about that within IFPRI itself too, I hope. How to build the capacity at the institutional level so that the best people aren't drained away into the international institutions in Washington and London.
So let's take the gender question. Who would like to respond to that? Why don't we have more women up here?
We were just evaluators. We asked the country program leaders, current and past, to nominate all their considered successes. And there were many, and we picked 20 of those for in-depth study, but not one of them concerned gender. So didn't give us an opportunity to pursue it. Sorry.
I mean, but building on that, there is a lot of work that IFPRI is doing on gender in Africa and other places as well, which I think the question came. So there's a lot of work on social protection actually focuses on gender outcomes, and we have a lot of work on intimate partner violence as well, and those looking at those relationships, and we've had a lot of influence in those areas. A lot of extension work we do is if we're looking at men's and women's access to information and so forth, and we have the WAO, of course, which CADP has adopted as one of their monitoring metrics, and we have a lot of influence increasing actually on country level policies and strategies. And Paul might want to go.
Okay. And I'd just like to mention that the first leader of the Ethiopia program was Eleni Gabra-Medin, and a national, so not just an IFPRI person hired. In fact, we stole her from the World Bank at the time, as you recall, Simeon. But so that's one example of a country program leader who did an excellent job, a female. But in general, you know, when we advertise for these positions, we haven't had many takers. And I think as we go forward, maybe this will happen. And we had a great presentation this morning from Emily Schmidt, who's kind of starting a pseudo country program in Papua New Guinea.
The mic, because I think the question of budget probably goes to you as well, right?
And that's absolutely crucial as to what a country program can do. And for a while, we had a rule of thumb that we wanted at least $1 million. Inflation has taken over. I think we need it, in general, 1.5 million a year, maybe even 2 million a year, to have a really solid program. And I think a really solid program has 4 PhD international researchers. And I say international, a lot of times those are citizens, nationals of the country. And one of my favorite stories of when I was going to become the program leader for Ethiopia, I had lunch with John Hodenot, always a good thing to do, ask his advice. One of his pieces of advice was, hire Alamayu Seyum, one of the top Ethiopian economists, and he's been golden for the program, not only in terms of the research, but in terms of being able to communicate at a very high level to national policymakers in a way that the foreigner can't always do. And that's been another big reason for success in Bangladesh over the last 10 years or so. We've had Akhtar Ahmed, a Bangladeshi there, heading up a lot of the work. And again, his understanding of the culture and the nuances of the policymakers and the interactions personally make a huge difference. And both those people I mentioned are super dedicated, as well as talented.
I sense that we would need a lot of time to do justice to Nancy's comment, but I do want to give us maybe just a minute to reflect. If I understood your statement correctly, Nancy, you're saying that the recent evaluation of the think tank initiative has shown that think tanks haven't perhaps had the strength and the traction that was initially expected. And if we're hearing that agricultural and food policy research is not best placed within agricultural ministries, and it's maybe not best placed in think tanks if they're struggling, where is it best placed? I think that's a key issue, which has come up in a number of the comments. The fact that there is capacity there, and yet how can that capacity be organized in a way that the IFPRI teams can work very well with it, and that local capacity can then lead the engagement with policymakers. Can anybody give us a 20-second response on that?
Yeah, I think IFPRI has had some successful experience setting up policy networks within countries. The 2020 program used to do that at one time. In Nigeria, the country program has set up a network of country policy researchers. I mean, that could be an important part of the indigenization process. So rather than building up an institution, you build up a network of people who are attached to different institutions. And that may be much more sustainable, particularly financially, into the long term. But yeah, I think maybe it's not the only answer. You still need a core institution somewhere, but these networks can be very successful.
At this point in the program, I think I have to be reminded at the fact that I have succeeded very poorly in managing our time. And we have a hard cutoff at 1:45 for our participants from the field or from the streaming. So I want to hand over to Schengen for a very quick close, but perhaps we could have one more comment from a board member.
Thank you. Jimmy Adam, Executive Secretary of Silsen, board member. The dynamics of food security and nutrition have changed since the security-related issues have got into the play. When are we going to take that into account? Thank you.
Each of you could have given us insights for 20 minutes, and we had so many hands in the room that we really couldn't recognize. So apologies for that, but I think that's an indication that this is a really important topic, that we've made a good start on discussing it, and it's one that's not going to go away. So look forward to future discussions on this, and perhaps some future innovations in how the learning that has taken place so far will be implemented in the changing context. So with that, I think I can sign off for the folks who are on the stream, but if anybody wants to sort of stay around and have some more informal discussions, I think we can do that. Although the board, I assume, has to go back to work, hard work. So thanks, goodbye.